Now this morning, NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden emerged from his airport hideaway, telling human rights groups that he wants temporary asylum in Russia, but still hopes to travel to Latin America to avoid prosecution by U.S. authorities. It was the world's first glimpse of the self-declared leaker, who's been hauled up in the transit zone of the Moscow airport since June 23rd. Snowden met with a small group of human rights campaigners and lawyers at an undisclosed location in the airport. Now, although the meeting was not public, some of those present posted details to Twitter, and RT was on the scene. Here's what Tanya Lakshana, the senior Russia researcher for Human Rights Watch, had to say about Snowden's status in the airport.
Fears that Snowden could be subjected to ill treatment in the U.S. are legitimate. He said he felt his living conditions were fine at the airport. He feels safe there, but he knows that he cannot stay forever.
But if he can't stay in the airport, will he be granted political asylum by Russia? One member of the Russian parliament who was invited to the meeting spoke about Snowden's qualifications for asylum.
I think he really satisfies the requirements for a political refugee because I'm not an expert on the issue, but human rights activists and lawyers who were there were at the end were agreeing that he was prosecuted for political reasons rather than on legal grounds.
So what's next for Edward Snowden? I was joined earlier by Ray McGovern, a former CIA analyst, and I first asked him how the U.S. was responding to Russia potentially taking in their #1 enemy.
Well, they're adopting a typically imperious stance. You must return him, despite the fact that no less than Putin has said we'd never extradite anyone. They're saying he's released all these kinds of secrets, which are not secrets to the Russians. And he's saying that the press spokesman for the president is saying that to give him asylum will damage relationship, but not very much, because you don't want this to damage it too much. So it's a situation where the U.S. government is in a terribly embarrassing position.
Right.
You know, here are the Russians, you know, offering asylum probably under international law. And, you know, I imagine that when the president calls Putin this afternoon, first question he's going to say, why did your guys tell my guys that Snowden was on that plane with Morales? That was a dirty trick.
And that was a trick.
Well, that's the way I construct. I mean,
is that how you see it? Okay.
How naive.
Interesting. That's an interesting
Well,
take.
I mean, somebody told him, and who has an incentive to embarrass the United States more than Putin? And so you have the U.S. completely embarrassing himself by leaning all over its allies. The ones in Europe succumb to them. The ones in Latin America don't.
Now, here's another question. What difficulties does Snowden now face in getting to the countries that have offered him asylum in Latin America, like Bolivia, Ecuador, Venezuela? What are the problems there?
Well, he's made it very clear in his statement that he's asked for asylum in Russia until such time as these other countries decide to abide by the law and give him the international right for asylum.
Right.
Not there, not in Spain or Portugal or France or Italy, who all folded, but in these 3 very courageous Latin American countries who didn't fold and are willing to accept him. So again, it's a complete embarrassment. Here's him appealing to the Russians, can you let me stay here for as long as it takes for these other countries that are under the heel of the United States to realize that they have international obligations and that they really ought to adhere to international law and convention.
Right now, it's our understanding that in order for Snowden to get to these Latin American countries ultimately, which seems like what he ultimately wants to do, he'll have to travel over U.S. airspace, and that could cause problems, no?
Well, it depends on how long he stays in Russia. You know, if he stays a couple of months, you know, he could change his appearance. He could, you know, there are lots of ways you could travel by land and then by sea, and you know, all those things are out in the future.
Out there.
The immediate problem is he said that he's not going to further embarrass the United States. Putin talks about the United States as being our partner.
Right, yeah.
And as long as he doesn't say anything from Moscow and lets Glenn Greenwald and the others say it from Brazil or from London, then he should be okay.
So what do you think Snowden's claims for asylum, do you think they should be satisfied by Russia?
Well, I think under international law, he's clearly entitled to political asylum.
Okay. Now, this is kind of an out there question, but we know that historically the lives of whistleblowers have been pretty bleak, to say the least. After the dust settles, really it's going to be a problem with they've been alcoholics or they've tried suicide attempts. What do you think is going to happen to Snowden?
Well, this is why the man is so courageous. I mean, look what happened to Bradley Manning. Look where Julian Assange has spent the last year. The fact that he's willing to take that risk in full expectation that he's not going to be really free man forever, that says a lot for him. I don't know what's going to happen, but this is a unique case, and Russia now has a bare responsibility partly for it.
That was former CIA analyst Ray McGovern.